Hi, and welcome back to Reddit Terrible Stories. I refused to give up my seat at Thanksgiving dinner because my aunt wanted to sit next to my grandma. Thanksgiving at my grandma's house had always been a big deal in our family. Every year, the long dining table would be pulled out, the mismatched chairs would be lined up, and we would all crowd around for turkey, stuffing, and the same arguments about who got the last piece of pumpkin pie. It was chaotic, loud, sometimes exhausting, but it was also tradition. For as long as I could remember, I had always sat in the same seat at that table. It wasn't officially my seat, but somehow it had become mine. It was right beside Grandma. When I was younger, she would help me cut my turkey or sneak me extra mashed potatoes. As I grew older, it became a comfort sitting next to the person I loved most in that room. I never asked for it, I never fought for it, but every year I naturally slid into that spot, and nobody complained. It was just the way it was. This year felt a little different, though. For one, it was the first Thanksgiving after Grandpa passed away, so emotions were already high. Grandma had been quieter, more fragile, and I knew she'd need someone steady beside her. I wanted to be that person, to keep her company, to help her if she felt overwhelmed. But as soon as I sat down, plate in front of me, Aunt Linda walked over. She was balancing her wine glass in one hand, looking around the table like she was surveying a battlefield. Then her eyes landed on me. "Sweetie," she said too sweetly, "can you scoot over? I'd like to sit next to Mom this year." The words hit me like a slap. It wasn't a request, it was a command wrapped in politeness. Everyone at the table seemed to pause, forks clinking softly, heads turning to watch. I froze for a second, my brain scrambling. Normally, I might have moved without a word, but something in me stiffened. "No," I said more firmly than I expected. "This is my seat." Sss. The silence that followed was heavy. Aunt Linda blinked at me, her smile faltering. "Excuse me?" "I always sit here," I said, my voice louder now. "Grandma and I sit together every Thanksgiving. I'm not moving." A ripple of whispers spread down the table. My mom shifted uncomfortably in her chair. My dad cleared his throat like he wanted to intervene but didn't. Grandma looked between us, clearly torn. Linda's face hardened. "Don't be ridiculous. I want to sit by my mother. You can sit literally anywhere else." I shook my head. "I'm staying here." It felt like the room was shrinking around me, every pair of eyes drilling into my skin. But I didn't move. I didn't apologize. For once, I decided I wasn't going to roll over just because someone older demanded it. Aunt Linda let out a sharp laugh, the kind that wasn't funny at all. "Unbelievable," she muttered, before storming off to find another chair. The tension stayed, thick and awkward, but slowly conversation resumed. I ate quietly, my heart pounding, aware that I had just done something nobody else dared to. I had said no to Aunt Linda, and I had no idea what storm that little word was about to unleash. Dinner carried on, but the energy in the room had shifted. The clinking of silverware and half-hearted laughter couldn't mask the subtle stares Aunt Linda kept throwing my way. She had ended up sitting across from Grandma, directly in my line of sight, and every time I looked up, she was glaring at me like I'd stolen her crown. I tried to focus on my food, on helping Grandma when she needed the cranberry sauce passed or when she struggled to cut her turkey. She gave me small smiles, the kind that told me she appreciated my presence. That alone reassured me I wasn't wrong. But everyone else? That was another story. At one point, I overheard my cousin Jessica whispering to her brother, "Can you believe she said no to Aunt Linda? Nobody ever says no to her." Her tone wasn't judgmental, more amazed, like I had just broken a long-standing law of physics. "Yeah," her brother muttered back, "but she's going to pay for it." My stomach twisted. This was exactly why people in my family didn't stand up to Aunt Linda. She was a master manipulator, a grudge holder, the kind of person who could turn everyone against you with a few well-placed comments. Sure enough, halfway through dessert, she started her campaign. "So," she said loudly, setting down her fork dramatically, "I suppose traditions don't mean much anymore." The table fell silent. Everyone knew she was addressing me without saying my name. "What do you mean?" Uncle Rick asked cautiously. "Well," Aunt Linda replied, "every year I've let other people take turns sitting by Mom. But this year, I thought it would be nice to have that spot. Apparently, some people don't think respecting their elders is important anymore. Her eyes flicked to me, sharp as knives. I clenched my jaw. I could have stayed quiet and let it roll off me, but I was tired of her twisting things. That's not true, I said, my voice steady. I've sat next to Grandma every Thanksgiving since I was little. It's special for us. I wasn't about to give that up just because you suddenly wanted it this year. Gasps rippled around the table. I had done it again. I had spoken back. Aunt Linda's lips thinned into a razor-sharp smile. Interesting. So now you're claiming your relationship with Mom is more important than mine? That's not what I said, I snapped, my pulse racing. I said I wasn't moving. There's a difference. Grandma reached over and touched my hand gently as if to calm me. Girls, please, she said softly. It's Thanksgiving. But the damage was done. The air was charged, tense. After dinner, people drifted into the living room for coffee and football. But I caught snippets of hushed conversations. Aunt Linda venting to anyone who would listen, her voice laced with outrage. Can you believe the disrespect? In front of everyone? I was humiliated. It wasn't long before cousins, uncles, even my parents started giving me those looks. The ones that said you should have just let her have it. But inside, I held firm. For once, I wasn't going to cave. This wasn't just about a chair. It was about standing up to years of Aunt Linda's entitlement. And if the whispers were any indication, I had just declared war. By the next morning, the fallout was already in full swing. Family gossip traveled faster than wildfire, and apparently my defiance at Thanksgiving dinner had become the topic of conversation. I woke up to 3 text messages from my mom. Mom, you should have just moved. It wasn't worth it. Mom, Linda called me last night. She's really upset. Mom, we'll talk about this later. My stomach sank, but I wasn't surprised. My mom had always chosen the path of least resistance when it came to her sister. If Aunt Linda threw a fit, the unspoken rule was, give her what she wants. Later that day, I called Grandma to check in. She answered on the 3rd ring, her voice warm but a little weary. Hi, sweetheart, I hope you're okay, she said. I'm fine, Grandma. Are you okay? I know things got a little tense last night. She chuckled softly. Tense is one word for it. Don't you worry about me. I was glad you stayed by my side. Linda can be dramatic. But I know your heart. Her reassurance meant everything. At least Grandma understood. Still, the rest of the family wasn't as forgiving. At Sunday dinner 2 days later, because in my family, we somehow can't go a single weekend without gathering, things were icy. My cousins barely spoke to me. My uncle made a pointed joke about assigned seating, and my mom, true to her word, pulled me aside. You embarrassed Linda in front of everyone, she said, her voice low but sharp. Mom, she tried to bully me out of my chair. What was I supposed to do? Just give in? Yes, she snapped, then sighed. Sometimes that's easier. You know how she is. That's the problem, I shot back. Everyone just gives in and she gets worse every year. I'm not doing it anymore. My mom pinched the bridge of her nose. You think you're making a point, but all you're doing is causing drama. I wanted to scream. Why was it always my responsibility to keep the peace, even when Aunt Linda was the one causing chaos? As the weeks went on, it became clear Aunt Linda wasn't letting this go. She brought it up at every family gathering, weaving it into unrelated conversations like a skilled politician. Oh, speaking of seating arrangements, she'd say with a sigh, remember how I wasn't allowed to sit by Mom at Thanksgiving? Some people just don't value family. It was exhausting. I found myself dreading family dinners, the constant side eyes, the muttered comments. I even considered skipping Christmas altogether just to avoid the tension. But Grandma, sweet as always, called me before the holiday. Please come, honey, she said. Don't let this silliness keep you away. You and I both know where you belong at that table. Her words gave me strength. If this had become a battle of wills, I wasn't going to be the one to retreat. Not when Grandma herself wanted me there. So I made up my mind. Come Christmas, I was sitting in that chair again, no matter what. And something told me Aunt Linda was already planning her next move. The moment I walked into my grandmother's house on Christmas Eve, I could feel the tension hanging in the air like smoke. The decorations sparkled. The smell of cinnamon and roasted turkey filled the rooms, and yet beneath the festive veneer, Everyone seemed on edge, all because of one stupid chair. I said my hellos, handed out gifts, and tried to pretend everything was normal. But as dinner approached, I saw Aunt Linda hovering near the dining room like a hawk circling its prey. She was determined to strike. The table was set beautifully. Grandma's best china, red and green napkins folded into perfect triangles, a centerpiece of holly and candles. And there it was, my seat, right next to Grandma, just where I'd sat at Thanksgiving. I moved quickly, slipping into the chair before anyone else could. Grandma gave me a little nod of approval, her eyes twinkling. But across the table, Aunt Linda's lips tightened into a thin line. "Really?" she muttered, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Really," I said firmly. The rest of the family exchanged nervous glances. My mom cleared her throat. "Let's not do this again tonight. It's Christmas." But Linda wasn't about to let it go. "I just don't understand why it's so difficult for someone," she cut her eyes at me, "to make a small sacrifice for family." Grandma reached over and patted my hand. "Linda, stop!" I like having her sit next to me. That should be the end of it. But Aunt Linda pressed on. "It's about respect, Mom. Don't you think I deserve to sit with you too?" "You sit across from me," Grandma said patiently. "That's close enough. You don't need to be on top of me." Everyone laughed nervously, but Linda's face turned crimson. She wasn't used to being shut down, even by her own mother. Dinner continued, but the air was thick with unspoken tension. Every time I passed a dish, Linda snatched it with a little too much force. Every time Grandma laughed at something I said, Linda rolled her eyes. It was like a silent war across the table. Then, midway through dinner, she struck again. "You know," she said loudly, "it's interesting how some people think they're entitled to special treatment. Sitting in the best spot, getting all the attention." I felt my pulse quicken, but I didn't rise to the bait. Grandma, however, leaned forward and fixed Linda with a look that could cut glass. "Linda," she said sharply, "enough. You're acting childish. This is Christmas. If you can't be gracious, maybe you shouldn't come next year." The table went silent. No one dared breathe. Aunt Linda's mouth opened, then closed again. She looked like she'd just been slapped. After that, dinner continued in awkward quiet, but something had shifted. For the first time, Grandma had publicly sided with me. It felt like a victory, but it also felt dangerous. Linda wasn't going to forget this. Later, as I was helping Grandma wash dishes, she whispered, "Don't worry, sweetheart. She needed to hear that. It's about time." I smiled, but in the pit of my stomach, I knew Aunt Linda was already plotting her revenge. After Christmas, things got weird. Aunt Linda didn't yell, didn't complain, didn't confront me. Instead, she went silent, completely, unnervingly silent. She stopped calling me, stopped commenting on family group texts, and whenever we ran into each other at gatherings, she acted like I didn't exist. At first, I thought it was a blessing. No more passive-aggressive remarks, no more theatrics about the seat at the table. But then I noticed she wasn't just ignoring me, she was trying to cut me out of the family entirely. When Easter planning rolled around, she forgot to include me on the group message about the potluck dishes. When my cousin had a birthday party, she claimed there weren't enough chairs and suggested I stay in the kitchen with the younger kids. At first it seemed petty, but the more it happened, the more it stung. The family was caught in the middle. My mom hated conflict and urged me to just give her the seat already. It's not worth all this. My dad, on the other hand, said Linda had been a bully since childhood, and I shouldn't cave now. Grandma refused to budge. She kept insisting she wanted me by her side at every holiday. But Linda wasn't letting it drop. At Easter dinner, she brought an extra chair and placed it right next to Grandma before anyone could sit. When I arrived, she crossed her arms and smirked like she'd finally won. I didn't say anything. I just sat on Grandma's other side, a little farther away, but still close enough for her to pat my hand. Linda looked furious, like I had stolen her thunder just by existing. From then on, the holidays felt like a battlefield. Every meal became a test of loyalty. Who would sit where? Who would speak up? Who would stay quiet? Family members shuffled their chairs nervously, trying not to offend one side or the other. But the worst part wasn't the seating. It was the way Linda tried to poison the well against me. She started spreading little comments behind my back. She thinks she's Grandma's favorite, she'd whisper to my cousins. Or, she's so selfish, always needing the spotlight. Some cousins avoided me after that, while others shrugged it off, but I could feel the divide deepening. Holidays that once felt warm and joyful now carried a heavy tension, all because of one chair. By the time summer rolled around, I dreaded the thought of Thanksgiving. I knew Linda was planning something. She wasn't the type to let things slide, and with Grandma getting older, every holiday felt more precious, more important. I didn't want to waste them fighting over furniture. But part of me also felt stubborn. I'd given in to Linda's drama my whole life. Why should I keep doing it now? Grandma wanted me by her side, and I wasn't about to let Linda bully me out of it. Still, the silent treatment was wearing me down. It's one thing to argue, it's another to be erased. And every time I walked into Grandma's house and saw Linda's icy stare, I knew the next Thanksgiving was going to explode. As Thanksgiving drew closer again, Mom decided she'd had enough of the tension. She announced that we were going to have a family meeting at Grandma's house in early November, long before the holiday. Her plan was simple: settle the seating issue once and for all. I was dreading it. The whole thing felt ridiculous. Grown adults sitting down like children to discuss who gets to sit where at dinner. But Mom insisted it was necessary. Otherwise, Thanksgiving would be ruined before it even began. So we all showed up on a chilly Saturday afternoon. Grandma sat in her recliner, looking tired but alert. Dad leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. Aunt Linda, of course, was perched dramatically at the edge of her chair, like she was preparing for a courtroom battle. A few cousins trickled in too, curious to watch the drama unfold. Mom cleared her throat. Okay, let's just talk about this like adults. No yelling, no interrupting. The issue is the seat at the table, Edith. Who sits next to Mom, Grandma? Linda immediately shot up from her chair. It should be me. I'm her daughter. I've sat there for years until recently when someone decided to take it over. She glared at me as if I had committed a crime. I stayed calm. Grandma asked me to sit by her. I didn't steal anything. I was invited. Grandma nodded weakly. That's true. I like having her next to me. She helps me with the food. She knows what I need. Linda's face turned red. So that's it? You're just replacing me with her? No one is replacing anyone, Grandma said gently. I love both of you, but I asked her to sit by me because it's easier for me now. My memory isn't as strong, my hearing isn't as sharp, and she helps me keep up with what's going on at the table. That doesn't mean I don't want you near me, Linda. Linda's eyes welled up with tears, but they didn't look like the tears of someone hurt. They looked like the tears of someone furious. This is humiliating. My own mother would rather sit by my niece than me. The room went silent. My cousins shifted uncomfortably. Mom sighed. Linda, no one is saying you can't sit by Grandma, too. The table is big enough for both of you. Why don't you sit on her other side? I don't want the other side, Linda snapped. I want my spot back. That's when Dad finally spoke. There is no spot. This isn't a throne, Linda. It's a chair at a dining table. You've turned this into a power struggle that doesn't need to exist. Linda turned on him, her voice sharp. Easy for you to say. She's not your mother. Grandma raised her hand weakly, her voice trembling. Enough. I don't want fighting. Holidays are supposed to bring us together. Please don't make me feel like a burden. That silenced everyone. For the first time, Linda looked guilty. She didn't apologize, but she sat back down, staring at the floor. The meeting ended without resolution. Mom tried to spin it as progress. At least people had aired their feelings, but I knew the truth. Nothing had been solved. Linda hadn't gotten what she wanted, and that meant she wasn't done. On the way home, Dad muttered, Mark my words. She's planning something for Thanksgiving. Be ready. I didn't want to believe him. But in the pit of my stomach, I knew he was right. Thanksgiving finally arrived again, and despite Mom's attempts to create a peaceful atmosphere, you could practically feel the tension in the air. Grandma's house smelled of roasted turkey, sweet potatoes, and cranberry sauce, but beneath the warm holiday scents lingered the sharp edge of unresolved conflict. When I walked in, Grandma gave me a tired but loving smile. I'm glad you're here early, she whispered. I want you to sit by me again, please. I nodded, my chest tightening. I knew what that meant, another showdown with Aunt Linda. Sure enough, when we started gathering around the table, Linda hovered near the chair beside Grandma, her hand resting possessively on its back like she was guarding it. I paused, feeling my heart pound. Then Grandma, without hesitation, tapped the chair with her hand and said, Sweetheart, sit here. The look on Linda's face could have curdled milk. But she didn't argue out loud this time. Instead, she sat down heavily on Grandma's other side, slamming her napkin onto her lap with a sharp flick. The message was clear. She was furious, but she wasn't going to cause a public scene. At first, I thought maybe we'd get through the meal peacefully. Conversations started flowing, the usual topics. How school was going for the younger cousins, Dad's stories from work, Grandma's quiet laughter at old memories. But then I noticed something. Every time I spoke to Grandma, Linda would lean in and repeat what I'd said, as if Grandma hadn't heard me. If Grandma asked me to pass something, Linda would grab it first and hand it to her, cutting me out entirely. It was petty, but it was constant, a silent war across the dinner table. At one point, Grandma asked me to cut her turkey for her, since it was tough. I picked up the knife, but Linda snatched it from my hand. I'll do it, she said sharply. Grandma frowned. I asked her to. Linda froze, then handed the knife back to me with trembling fingers, her lips pressed into a thin line. The cousins exchanged nervous glances. Dad looked like he was about to explode, but Mom put her hand on his arm, silently begging him not to. The rest of the meal carried on in that uncomfortable stop-and-start rhythm. Linda trying to assert herself. Grandma gently but firmly redirecting her. Me caught in the middle, wishing I could disappear. By the time dessert came around, I was exhausted. Grandma leaned over and whispered, Don't let her wear you down. I know what she's doing. But you're here because I want you here. Her words meant more than she probably realized. Still, as I looked across the table at Linda's cold stare, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't over. She hadn't gotten her way, and Linda was the type of person who never let things go. Later that night, as everyone packed leftovers into containers and got ready to leave, Linda pulled me aside near the doorway. Her voice was low but sharp enough to cut glass. You think you've won, she hissed. But this isn't finished. That seat is mine. You'll regret trying to take it from me. Before I could even respond, she grabbed her coat and stormed out into the cold night. I stood there frozen, my stomach in knots. It was just a chair, but somehow it felt like the future of every holiday hung in the balance, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could fight her. After that Thanksgiving, the family seemed split into invisible factions. Some quietly supported me, agreeing that I had every right to sit next to Grandma since she asked me to. Others, mostly Linda's children and a couple of her siblings, kept repeating, It's always been her seat. You should respect that. It was bizarre. A simple chair at the table had turned into a battle line, and I was in the center of it whether I liked it or not. Grandma, for her part, didn't budge. Every time I visited, she reminded me, I want you by me. She'd smile gently and tell me not to worry about Linda, but I could see the weariness in her eyes. She hated the drama, even if she didn't cause it. Christmas was quieter than usual, but the tension remained. Linda gave me the cold shoulder the entire evening, barely acknowledging me except when absolutely necessary. When Grandma handed me a wrapped present and said she had picked it out just for my helper, Linda rolled her eyes so hard I thought they'd get stuck. By spring, the whispers started. Cousins texting me late at night, Aunt Linda says you're manipulating Grandma, or she's telling everyone you're selfish. At first, I tried to ignore it, but the more I heard, the heavier it sat in my chest. Finally, one day in early May, I ran into Linda at the grocery store. I could have avoided her, but something inside me snapped. I was tired of the silent war. Why are you doing this? I asked, standing by the frozen food aisle, with my cart between us. It's one seat. Grandma asked me to sit there. Why can't you just accept that? Her face twisted. Because it's my seat. It always has been. You don't understand the bond I have with her. You're trying to replace me. That's not true, I said firmly. She just wants me by her side. That doesn't mean she loves you any less. Linda's voice rose, attracting stares. You're stealing her from me. You think you're her favorite, but you're not. I'm her daughter. You're just a kid. People in the aisle pretended to browse while eavesdropping, their eyes darting back and forth between us like they were watching a tennis match. My hands shook as I gripped the cart handle. I'm not trying to compete with you, I said quietly, but I'm not going to let you bully me either. If Grandma wants me there, then that's where I'll be. Linda's lips pressed into a thin line, and she turned on her heel, leaving her half-full cart behind as she stormed out of the store. That summer, family gatherings became even more fractured. Some relatives stopped showing up altogether, tired of the drama. Others whispered behind closed doors, and every time a holiday approached, my stomach churned with dread, wondering what fresh confrontation awaited. Grandma, though, never wavered. She'd pat the chair beside her and say, "This is yours." Her quiet defiance gave me strength, even as Linda's resentment grew deeper and darker with every passing month. And I began to realize this wasn't just about a seat at Thanksgiving. For Linda, it was about control. For me, it was about respect. The question was, how long could this Cold War last before it finally erupted? By the time Thanksgiving rolled around again, I already knew things would come to a head. The year had been tense, full of whispered conversations, passive-aggressive comments at birthdays, and the constant pressure of Linda's resentment simmering just below the surface. I dreaded the holiday, but Grandma insisted, "Please come. Don't let her scare you away." When I arrived, the dining room was already set. I felt my throat tighten as I noticed Linda had deliberately placed her purse on the chair next to Grandma, as if to mark her territory. The air was thick with tension, and several relatives avoided eye contact, clearly aware of what was coming. I stood frozen for a moment, debating whether to ignore it, when Grandma spoke loudly enough for the whole room to hear, "That's not your seat, Linda. I want it free." The room went silent. Forks clinked against plates. My cousins looked at one another nervously. Linda stiffened. "Mom, we've been over this. I always sit here." "Not anymore," Grandma said firmly. "I want them here. It's my choice." Linda's face turned red. "You're letting a child manipulate you. This is ridiculous." Grandma's voice softened but didn't waver. "Linda, I love you, but this isn't about tradition. It's about what makes me comfortable. And what makes me comfortable is having them by me." Everyone was staring now, some in shock, others in grim fascination. My heart pounded in my ears, but I finally stepped forward, gently moving Linda's purse onto the counter. I sat down slowly, my hands trembling as I tried to keep my face neutral. That was when Linda exploded. "You've ruined this family!" she shouted, standing up so abruptly her chair scraped across the hardwood floor. "You've poisoned Mom against me? You think you're so special, but you're nothing but selfish and disrespectful." Her voice echoed through the dining room, sharp and furious. A couple of my younger cousins started to cry. My uncle tried to calm her down, but she shoved his hand away. "Maybe I won't come here anymore," Linda yelled. "If I'm not wanted, then fine. Enjoy Thanksgiving without me." She stormed out, slamming the front door so hard the walls shook. The silence that followed was deafening. Everyone sat frozen, processing what had just happened. My hands were clammy, my appetite gone. Finally, Grandma sighed and said, "Pass the mashed potatoes." Her attempt at humor broke the tension, and a few people laughed nervously, but the damage was done. The rest of dinner carried on in uneasy quiet. We made small talk, tried to pretend nothing had happened, but Linda's absence hovered over the table like a dark cloud. I couldn't stop shaking, guilt gnawing at me even though I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. Later that night, Grandma held my hand and whispered, "You didn't cause this." She did. She made it about herself, not me. Her words gave me some comfort. But I also knew things would never be the same again. A line had been crossed, and there was no going back. The family was fractured, maybe permanently, and all over one seat at Thanksgiving dinner. The weeks after that, Thanksgiving were heavy with silence. Linda stopped answering texts and calls from most of the family. She didn't come to Christmas. She skipped Grandma's birthday, and whenever her name came up, people shifted uncomfortably, not knowing what to say. I struggled with guilt, wondering if I should have just given up the seat to keep the peace. Maybe if I had swallowed my discomfort, we wouldn't be in this mess. But every time I started down that road, I remembered Grandma's words. This is about my comfort, not Linda's. That reminder grounded me. Grandma reassured me often. She told me that families sometimes fracture when truth comes out, but she preferred honesty over resentment. She insisted that Linda's behavior wasn't new. It had always been there, simmering beneath the surface, and that my decision had simply exposed what was already broken. Still, the family adjusted awkwardly. Holidays were smaller, quieter. The absence of Linda's booming laughter and overbearing presence was noticeable, but so was the absence of her constant criticisms and attempts to control everyone. My younger cousins seemed more relaxed without her dominating the room. One evening, months later, I ran into Linda at the grocery store. She spotted me before I could turn away. Her face hardened, but she walked over, clutching her basket. You're still sitting in my seat, aren't you?" she said bitterly. No greeting, no attempt at small talk. I forced a calm tone. "It was never your seat, Linda. It was Grandma's choice." Her eyes narrowed. "You turned her against me. You'll regret it one day when she's gone and you realize what you've done." I didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking sharply against the floor. That night, I told Grandma about the encounter. She shook her head slowly, sadness in her eyes. "She's angry at losing control, but she'll either come around or she won't. It's not your burden to carry." And I realized she was right. I couldn't fix Linda's feelings, nor could I erase the conflict. All I could do was hold on to the bond I had with Grandma and honor the seat she had chosen for me. Years later, when Grandma passed, the memory of those Thanksgivings haunted me. At the funeral, Linda sat stiff and distant, refusing to make eye contact. But as people shared memories, one of my cousins mentioned how Grandma always liked having me by her side at family dinners. I felt tears sting my eyes, not from guilt this time, but from gratitude. I hadn't stolen anything. I had simply accepted the place Grandma had offered me. Thanksgiving was never quite the same after that, but I came to understand that families aren't defined by tradition or rigid seating charts. They're defined by love, respect, and the willingness to honor someone's wishes, even if it causes conflict. And as painful as that lesson was, I knew I had made the right choice. Because sometimes, refusing to give up your seat isn't about stubbornness. It's about standing up for the person who asked you to stay,